Tiana Shoei. I'm an executive, a reader, writer, entrepreneur, athlete, life coach, and energy. This is my podcast. Tiana Shoei ain't quite right. Join us as we laugh, learn, and live big. Hello, everyone. This is Tiana Shoei, and welcome to my podcast. Tiana Shoei ain't quite right. You guys, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is the episode I have been most excited about out of any episode I've recorded. And we're going on now a little over a year doing this podcast, season 2, because the guest that we have today is one of the main reasons why I'm standing behind this microphone. I am so excited to introduce to you Mr. Rob Berg. Now, I met Rob through some business work, and he had this sneaky little title that I noticed, and it said coach. At that time, I knew I was ready to grow and develop and get out of some bad habits that I had. And so I reached out to Rob and I said, hey, tell me about this coaching thing. And out of the kindness of his heart, my crazy didn't scare him off. And Rob took me under his wing and began to coach me. And that process absolutely transformed my life. And he gave me the courage and the ability to kind of navigate my way through this complex world that I had seemed to make quite a mess of in my past. And that is the reason that I'm standing here today, is just through the kindness, the insight, the overwhelming mentorship and everything else that Rob provided me in that time as his coachee. And so with this being said, this is why I'm so excited for today's episode, because you guys are going to get to hear from Rob directly. So hello, Rob. Welcome to my podcast.
Wow, it's a big bar to hurdle over here. Thank you for that intro.
Well, the good news is it's completely true. So that's the good news.
How about that?
Well, but apart from my glowing recommendation of Rob, just simply because of the life transformation I experienced working with Rob, Rob's resume is quite extensive. And as I started to sit here and decide, how do I even talk about Rob? I just decided that I'm gonna steal the information from the back of his book. And yes, you heard that right, his book. That is one of the things we're going to be talking about today, is the absolute diamond mine of information that Rob just recently was kind enough to share with the world. So I can't wait to get into that. But first, let's talk about who Rob is and where he comes from. So Rob is a principal and a director of operations and technology consulting practice at Parent Knight. And so for those of you who are in the insurance industry who listen to this, you're very familiar with who Parent Knight is. They are a boutique consulting firm headquartered in Santa Monica, California. Rob is, as a practice leader and a coach, he works with consulting professionals to help them develop more meaningful client relationships and have a greater impact and enjoy more fulfilling careers. And we're going to get into this in great depth when we get into Rob's book. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. And, the first thing I did when I saw Rob after reading this was saying, thank you, Rob. I love this book. It was amazing. Rob also holds a master's degree in management and leadership, is a graduate of Stanford University's Advanced Project Management program, and is a certified executive coach. So Rob, thank you. And again, welcome on today's podcast.
My pleasure. And thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to share with you today.
Well, I think I told you when I first started this, once this podcast was more than just me in a room talking to myself with like 3 listeners, that I wanted you on, and I wanted it to be good use of your time. Now that we're in our second season and have a great audience, I think hopefully this will be a good use of your time. And I know it's going to be a good use of everybody else's time, because like I said, we got so much to learn from you. So as you can see, I had fun reading your book. For those of you who are listening, I am showing Rob the marked up pages and the bookmarks I made for stuff we can go through and talk about today. But Rob, I remember when we were talking, when we were coaching one another, I would always ask you how you were doing. And you started to talk about the idea of writing a book. And I think at that point you had a good bit of it written, but you hadn't quite finished it up yet. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. Because I had started writing it probably 20 years ago. So there was an awful lot of content that I brought forward into that work. Yeah.
And then you put the pedal to the metal and you finished this book up, and it officially went live on Amazon. That was just in the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, July, the end of July, it went live. It's actually in what we call soft launch.
Okay.
It has not been widely distributed or launched yet. That's happening this month. So there'll be a much more, I guess, pronounced effort to get the word out. So.
Well, awesome. Well, I'm glad to be one of the early adopters.
Indeed. Yeah.
Well, so let's just start off by talking about the courageous consultant. Now, before we get too deep, I just want to pause anybody who's like, I'm not a consultant, so this book isn't going to apply to me. I just want to pause you right there. By the time you get done with this podcast episode, you're going to say, I'm so glad I listened to this, because I just got done telling Rob, I hope his next book is a general self-help personal growth book, because while I learned a ton about consulting from this book, and I do a little bit of consulting on the side. So this was, for me, it was absolutely the whole kit and caboodle, but there's so much great practical life advice in this that as we get into this and I get to ask Rob and poke and prod a little bit, we're going to have a lot of fun. And you guys are going to walk away doing the same thing I did when I got done reading this book, and I was like, that was amazing. So first of all, Rob, I want to say congratulations and thank you. But you put in the time, you got it done. Like, I guess the biggest question is, because not a lot of people have the opportunity to meet an author, what would you say the most rewarding part about writing a book was?
Well, clearly getting it done, just hold and literally like getting it in your hands. Like when that first kind of proof copy came and it was in my hands, it was, I can't even tell you what that feeling is.
Yeah.
It's the culmination of a lot of years of wanting to do it. And you talk to a lot of people and I'm going to write a book. I want to write a book. To actually have done it was incredibly gratifying, but to hold it in your hand and see your name on it, it gives me goosebumps just talking about it. So it was great. Anyone out there who's thinking about writing a book, just do it, get it done, and it will be one of the proudest moments of your life.
I love that. And I want everybody to hear what Rob just said. If you're thinking about it, just do it and get it done. Well, as we dive in, I just want to give kind of an overview. We're not going to give away all the secrets, because this is a book you're going to want to buy for yourself and do exactly what I did, which is mark it up and highlight it for all the practical and great advice that's in it. But what I love what you did with this is you did a really good job doing what I call sandwiching. And this is not something that, as you know, Rob, I'm an avid reader. So this is not something a lot of authors do that more authors should do. You told us what you were going to tell us at the beginning. You told us what you were going to tell us in the middle. And then you told us what you said you were going to tell us at the end. You did a great job kind of opening it up, summarizing, giving the information, and then re-summarizing, and doing so with so many practical tools. So at the end of each chapter, you give a summary of how to apply the information that you gave. You give real practical, real world advice. You tell stories, and it helps bring these concepts to life. So it goes from more than just a theoretical understanding to actual practical. And anybody who reads this book can walk away going, oh, that's how I could use this. I loved that. That was a fantastic way to present this information.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So you give us 7 keys, and we're going to go through these 7 keys. But before we get into them, we're going to go through the different chapters, because I made notes in each chapter that I wanted to talk to you about. But I think it'll be helpful for the listeners just to know what these 7 keys are that we're going to talk about. The first key is know who you are. The second key is master the basics. The third key is always be curious. The fourth key is think holistically. The fifth key is provide value, not hours. The sixth key is get leverage. The seventh key is make it your own. And so this is going to kind of be the theme that runs through everything we talk about. So the first thing that I fell in love with was page 13. I didn't get very far in the book before I was already highlighting and underlying things. And you said something that I thought was really important, and I just kind of wanted to highlight this. You said, we enjoy longer-term relationships when we maintain an air of humility rather than entitlement.
Yeah, it's tough, especially in our profession. In our profession, we're paid for our advice. We're paid for our wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
We're paid for our expertise. And it's very tempting to walk into a client situation and start proffering all of this great counsel to your client. And I've found that exceptional advisors don't do that. Exceptional advisors ask a lot of questions. it's probably 80-20, 80% questions, 20% response. And to do that, you need to kind of hold your tongue, and you need to acknowledge the fact that your client knows more about their business than you will ever know. And taking that to your engagement will breed trust, will breed, you want your client ultimately to hear you, maybe not listen to you, perhaps, but you want them to hear you and respond to you, and not react to you. You understand the difference? So not just instantly reacting because you're challenging them and you're putting them on the defensive, but respond thoughtfully to you because you listen to them and you're really trying to show them how you understand what their issues are before you start to formulate any kind of solution.
And as a side note, I think if we took that approach in marriage, if we took that approach in our employment, and if we took that approach in friendship, we would have much better relationships. Do you not agree?
Absolutely. I mean, no question about it.
Yeah. And that's why I was saying, I read through this and I thought, wow, this is going to go beyond just a professional application, because, these are truisms that apply in every aspect of our life. And none of us like to be friends with somebody who's a know-it-all and doesn't listen, right?
That is right.
Wait. That sounds like a toddler to me.
Yeah.
So continuing on, you do a great job talking about something that I think is underrated in our modern day world. And that is on page 17, you talk about, you'll see how satisfying your psychological needs while aligning your work with your signature strengths enhances your ability to derive fulfillment from your consulting career. And I would even put in there from your career.
Yeah.
And I love how you bring out our psychological needs in this book, because how many people, I can guarantee you that there are so many people listening to this today that are not getting their needs met in their work, and they can't understand why. And you hit the nail on the head with that statement.
Well, sure. Thanks. Every year, I think it is, Gallup does a poll of workplace engagement. Mm-hmm. And year after year after year, I mean, something like 65-70% of the workforce writ large is not engaged in the work that they're doing. A smaller percentage, 30%, are actively sabotaging the organization or the work that they're doing. And the challenge is exactly that. It's that their psychological needs are not being met. In addition to that, the idea of infusing or expressing your own personal values in the work that you're doing also aids in that engagement. It goes back, that's an idea that goes back to the Stoics in ancient Greece, where they had this concept called eudaimonia, well-being. And in order to achieve well-being, their thought was you need to be able to express authentically the values that you have in whatever you're doing. It could be your work or your play.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into that just a little bit more as we go through the book, but I just wanted to say what a fantastic way to start off a book, because it's you absolutely right. You can go 1,000 miles in the wrong direction, only to discover you've gone in the wrong direction. And so knowing, intention and strategy are two different things. And part of that strategy has to include meeting your psychological needs. Now, continuing on from there, you give us what you call Rob's credo for the 21st century. And here's my only regret, that this isn't a poster that I can't hang on my wall. I might see if I can photocopy this and put it on my wall, because I think that if first of all, we could all figure out what our credos are, adopt them and live by them, we would be healthier, sounder people. And I think I found your credos hidden all throughout the message in your book, where it's obvious that these are values that you've adopted throughout your entire life since you decided to write them down.
Yeah, clearly. And there was a moment back in the 90s. And in the book, I share some challenges that I had gone through, all, for the most part, self-imposed. But I got to a point, and I remember lying in my bed in a shared apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, as a grown man in his 30s, even then, and thinking, what the heck am I doing? What am I doing? And, there was a new, not just a new decade, but a new century coming up within the next couple of years. And I thought, this can't go on. Like, I need to get serious. Too many failed relationships, too many, starts and stops with, entrepreneurial endeavors that just never really went anywhere. And I was kind of kidding myself. And I just sat down and wrote those 10 things down and said, these are standards that I will live by every day. And to this day, more than 20 years later, I still visit that very, very frequently, just to remind myself that these are what are the things that are important. And these are the things, the ideals, the values that pulled you out of that morass so many years ago.
Yeah, well, I love it. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to just read them at a high level. You're going to have to get the book to read the description you give in each one. But I love these. You say, do what you will say you will do. No negative thinking. Put aside childish things. Dress to impress. Visualize your dream. Work hard daily. Be diligent. Educate yourself. Take charge. Lead. Live in the moment and celebrate the little victories. And the detail you give to reiterate those is amazing. And those are absolutely values, credos that all of us should adopt. And, your resume, the content of this book, just the way you changed my life are all evidence that living by these credos has worked really well for you. And so hint, listeners, take note.
Well, thank you. That's great. That means a lot. So.
Oh, well, you know what, Rob, I'm so glad you shared those with us because, they're absolutely fantastic. And like I said, the evidence that they've worked, is displayed in your life and in my life as well, because I get to be a byproduct of your hard work. So I would like to thank the 30-year-old version of Rob that put those together. All righty. Well, continuing on, you break down, we're in key 1 now, which is know who you are. And you break down our psychological needs. So we kind of touched on this at the beginning, but there are three psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So tell us a little bit more about these.
Well, this again goes to engagement. So with respect to autonomy, if you're being micromanaged or someone's telling you what to do every minute of every day or peering over your shoulder and you're not given the latitude to express yourself creatively or in any manner that you feel that you want to express yourself, you will tend to withdraw and you will tend to disengage. So that's autonomy. Competence is, there's this concept called flow in the work that we do. A psychologist out of Claremont Graduate University came up with this concept and wrote a book 20 years ago or so called Flow. And it's basically the idea that you get lost in what you do. You have no concept of time. And when you do that, you're expressing confidence, and competence, I should say. You're not overly challenged, and you're not, it's not a super easy thing that you're doing. You're not bored by it. But there's a level of competence that you express in the work that you do that brings to bear the best parts of yourself, again, that aren't so difficult that they're frustrating and aren't so easy that they're boring. So it's finding that level of competence that can be expressed in your work. And then finally, relatedness. That's a big one. Many authors, especially over the last 5 or 10 years, have written about the idea of finding your why, Simon Sinek, purpose, finding your life's purpose or your purpose in your work. And relatedness goes to that idea that you are contributing to something larger than yourself, and you're acknowledged for that contribution. So taken together, if you can be autonomous in your work, if you can express that level of competence that gets you into that flow state and experience that relatedness, you're acknowledged for your good work that serves something larger than yourself, that's the home run. And I'll say this, this book is what I'll call aspirational. It's an idealization of who I really want to be. I certainly don't always live up to every standard, but I sure try. So.
Well, and knowing where to aim is half the battle.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, I know having, obviously not being nearly as well read as you are, but still being an avid reader, I had never seen these three concepts so concisely and precisely articulated. So now I have something to aim for. And you just gave our listeners something to aim for. These are the things in your life that you're going to need if you want your psychological needs in your workplace met. But I think also, Rob, these psychological needs go deeper than just the work that we do. They spill over or bleed over into every aspect of our life. So in our relationships, everything.
Everything. Absolutely. Work and play, school, church, your community. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for including them. Again, this is why I was saying to the listeners, you guys, listen, this book is so rich and so deep. And one thing I will point out, while this is specifically written to consultants, if you are an employee, you're a consultant in some capacity. Your company is not just paying you for your time, but they're paying you for what makes you a unique human being. And so all of these principles are applicable if somebody is buying your expertise or your function as a human being, which is what really employment is, right? They're buying our time, they're buying our expertise in something. And this is applicable in a broad spectrum, far beyond consulting. Now, as a consultant, this is going to be my go-to book. But
it's great.
So the next thing that you did that I thought was really fascinating, and I just kind of want to read over these at a high level, is you talk about, discovering who you are. And you say in the book, in order to discover who you are, you really need to examine the 6 virtues and the 24 character strengths within those virtues to best get a handle on, what makes you who you are. And I thought this was, again, brilliant. Having read hundreds of books, I'd never seen such a great, concise list. So if it's all right with you, I'd like to just quickly read through that list and talk about it, because I think this is something that very few people have probably ever seen in this kind of a list as it pertains to who we are as individuals.
Sure.
So you talk about the virtue of wisdom, and within wisdom, the character strengths you talk about are creativity, curiosity, judgment, love of learning, perspective. Which sums up wisdom very well. The virtue of courage, you talk about bravery, perseverance, honesty, and zest.
Yeah.
The virtue of humanity, you talk about love, kindness, and social intelligence, which you and I have talked a lot about emotional intelligence, and social intelligence is an EI competency. The virtue of justice, teamwork, fairness, leadership. The virtue of temperance, forgiveness, humility, prudence, and self-regulation. Again, another EI competency. The virtue of transcendence, the appreciation of beauty and excellence, gratitude, hope, humor, spirituality. That is an incredible list, Rob.
Yeah, well, I mean, I obviously can't take credit for the list. I can take credit for how it's presented. Mm-hmm. The character strengths are the product of the grandfather, if you will, of positive psychology, Marty Seligman. He's a professor still. He teaches at University of Pennsylvania. And he devised, and I forget his partner's name, who's since deceased, but they came up with these 24 character strengths and created something called the VIA Institute of Character. And it's a great, just to go visit their website, viacharacter.org. Mm-hmm. There's a wealth of information on really digging deep into each of those things. And there's a survey that's available there that you can take for free to discover what your character strengths are, but importantly, what your top 3 to 5 character strengths are, which are your signature strengths. And those are the things that we try to express in our work. And when we do express them in our work, we again tend to be more engaged in the work that we're doing. And I found that to be very, very useful personally, and in coaching folks, I found it really resonated with them. And if I can, I want to relate a story about a programmer I was working with, a developer who was really disengaged from his work. And I had him take the survey, and his number one character strength, his top signature strength, was appreciation of beauty and excellence. And I asked him to respond to that. I said, hey, I won't mention his name, but I said, how do you respond to that? And he said, he's an analytical guy. He's hardcore numbers person. He's a techno geek. He's, into writing code and head down. I said, how can you express that value, your appreciation of beauty and excellence, in your writing of code, of software code? And we started to have a conversation around that. Well, I can write more elegant code. And then, what do you mean by elegant code? Well, the brackets can line up and I can do different lines in different colors. I can comment it different. And he really found out how to express that number one value in work that was otherwise deflating him. And I find that finding meaning, I call that finding meaning in the mundane. And that's the key. Like, by applying those values, when you identify what they are and you identify how you can express them in your work, you're finding meaning in the mundane, and you power your way through even those really challenging and tedious things. For example, like writing a book.
No, and that's a great story. And thank you for sharing that, because, well, a couple things. First of all, you gave us a great tool, the viacharacter.org. So again, it's free. Listeners, go take this, because to your point, if you have a misalignment with your values, or you aren't acknowledging your values in your day-to-day work, that simple shift, like the story you just gave us, can be the difference between loving your job and hating your job. And, again, just a testament to your fantastic coaching ability, but also how simple some of these little shifts in our mindset can be once you know what it is you're aiming for.
That's it. It's exactly right. It's just a little change in perspective. And there are resources also on that website. There's another psychologist, Ryan Nemec, who has really popularized this whole character strengths idea. And he's written a couple of excellent books on character strengths and how to find your way to expressing them in the work that you're doing. So I highly encourage you to check out his work.
Thank you for sharing those resources with us. And, just to kind of summarize what we were talking about, what I love about what you've done in this book, and I mentioned this earlier, is how you give application at the very end of each chapter. And so you kind of go through and you say, here's a summary and here's how you apply it. So just a great way to take everything that you shared with us and then have us sit down and ask ourselves some tough questions at the end of each chapter. So I just wanted to comment that I really liked how you did that at the end of each chapter.
Thank you.
So now the second key, master the basics. I learned something about you in this book. Apparently, I wouldn't want to get in a street fight with you because I wanted to just read this quote and have you speak to this a little bit, which in this, by the way, I saw your credo, celebrate the little victories. So I just wanted to point out, as I noted, you had some of your credos listed in here, but you said on page 53, if you can earn one black stripe, you can earn an entire black belt. The lesson: start with the basics and keep building from there, as they provide the foundation needed for advanced training and for handling those few later instances where I definitely avoided physical altercations by calmly and confidently dissuading would-be combatants from continuing their aggressions. So talk about this experience you had earning a black belt, and just this one little example here. You talk about celebrating the little victory, getting your first black stripe on your white belt.
Yeah, and that's it. It's now I'm a tall, lanky guy, and I always have been in the same weight I was as a sophomore in college. Years ago. That was unintelligible on purpose. Many years ago, and I was never terribly athletic. My greatest athletic accomplishment was playing intramural basketball in grammar school, and I had a full court break. I ran all the way down the court and sunk a 2-pointer in the wrong basket. That was so not really athletic. So I saw an exhibition, a karate exhibition out in New York, where I'm from, and I was just amazed. And the Karate Kid was coming out at the time of the movie, and there was a karate club on campus in the university I was going to. So I joined it. Why not? I had always been interested in it. As a little kid, I read books about it, what have you. And for a year, we did nothing. You march up and down the dojo floor in just very basic stances, doing very basic punches, very basic kicks. And it's grueling. This is 3 hours back and forth. And by the way, you don't get out of line, you don't yawn, or you get whacked in the head. So it was excruciating. And after a year, there were maybe 20 people in the white belt class at that time. And Sensei pointed to 3 of us after class and said, Rob, add a black stripe, this one, and it was just this huge, like, wow, that's what it took to get a black stripe. Now I've got to go through 2 more black stripes to get tested to get my next belt, which was green belt, and then another couple of stripes on that to get tested for purple, and then to get tested for brown and go through another few stripes to get tested for black. Like, how am I going to do this a year? I'm going to be 80 years old by the time I get this thing. So a fellow karateka, as they call them, after class came to me and she said, great job. If you can earn 1 black stripe, you can earn an entire black belt. And it was a perfect metaphor. I was like, that's right. Just little by little, chip away. You want to play piano like Bill Evans, learn your scales. You got to cut through the scales. You have to do the tedium. You have to go through that work. You have to find meaning in the mundane. Keep your eyes on that prize and find meaning in the mundane to get to that goal. And 4 years later, I was tested for black belt. And what I realized when I was tested for black belt was that's just the beginning. Now you know the basics. And I
loved that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that story. And thank you for sharing that, because I think sometimes we look at the end goal and we get so overwhelmed, but it wasn't sitting your first day in karate class and imagining, you're going to be a black belt that got you there. It was showing up every day and doing the work every day that eventually got you there.
Absolutely. We called ourselves karate majors, our friends, but the focus that we got from working out really helped our studies when we were in school. So
yes. And touche to that. That is an extraordinarily true thing that I think sometimes we take for granted. So continuing on, you made a statement here that I thought was so profound, and I just wanted to share it and have you comment on it. On page 62, talking about the basic qualities, because you go through in this chapter and you talk about master the basics. So we're still in the basic qualities. You said, you don't get to decide that you're a trusted advisor. Only your clients do. And I think we could say, you don't get to decide that you're a good employee. Only your employer does. You don't get to decide that you're a good spouse. Only your spouse does.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, that to me was always interesting, and no disrespect to anybody out there, but on LinkedIn profiles, when their headline says, I'm a trusted advisor, or you get a resume and they say, I'm a trusted advisor. Trusted by whom? And I did a search on LinkedIn, and there were like close to 3,000 people who stated that they were trusted advisors. You don't decide that, the people who come to you for advice, or come to you for a relationship, or come to you for anything, it's that, you've got to be the example that invites that. You can't, I don't think it's appropriate to pronounce yourself that, so.
No, and I love that. And that kind of goes back to the very first thing we started off with, which is humility. And if you don't have that humility, then, you're going to miss that. Now, I am sitting here going through, realizing that I'm not even halfway through my tabs, and we are more than halfway through our time, which may mean we have to have a part 2. So I'm going to skip some of this stuff because, again, get the book if you want to get all the nuggets that I had here. But I wanted to talk about a couple of things, because you talk, you first of all, in chapter 4, talking about think holistically. Oh gosh, your story talking about, what you went through just to get a medical diagnosis is pretty profound. And, you wrap that up talking about how frequent you say, basically we have a lot of hammers looking for nails, how common it is to have misdiagnoses. And this is applicable, obviously, not just in the medical world. You're talking about how easy it is for us to misdiagnose things, especially consultants, employees. I mean, how often as an employee do we misdiagnose the problem within our own organization, or in our relationships, do we misdiagnose the problems in our own relationships? So I just wanted to talk to you and get, have you comment on that a little bit, because I thought that was first of all, a profound story that you shared, but then a profound insight.
Yeah. I mean, not to go into great detail about the situation, but I had some unpleasant symptoms that had troubled me for over, about a year or so. And like most men, there's a joke that, men's first visit to the doctor is when they have their first heart attack. For whatever reason, I think I can say this, we're terrified of the doctor. But I went. After 20 years, I hadn't had an exam, and all my blood work came back great. And everything looked good, except I had this persistent symptom. And so the doctor ordered a workup, but he didn't do it himself. He started sending me out to all kinds of specialists. He sent me to a cardiologist. He sent me to a urologist. He sent me to a gastroenterologist. I had MRIs. My goodness. I mean, you can't imagine over a 3-month period, the appointments and things I went through for this symptom that I was experiencing. And I went through all that, and of course, nobody could find anything. And, come back in 3 months and come back in 6 months and we'll follow up. And I started doing my own research because I remembered what I did for a living. I solve problems, or I help solve problems, I should say. And I found 2 books that just profoundly influenced how I thought about myself and my body and the medical profession and all of that. And I put what I learned in those writings to work. And inside of a couple of months, my symptoms were gone completely. No more doctors, no more. And again, doctors are great, but they didn't see me as a complete person. One saw me as, whatever part of the body they studied, that was interesting to them. And while they traded notes with each other, it's almost like they're competing. Well, no, I think it's this. No, I think it's this. And it was just that's a great metaphor for the way some consultants approach organizations, and some managers and leaders approach their organizations. They look at the parts instead of the sum of the parts. And it's really important, even if you're looking at, the sales, the sales function, if you're consulting, well, you better take a hard look at the products. You better take a hard look at the HR function. You better take a look at compensation. You better look at the physical environment people are working in. You've got to look holistically at that organization. You can't just take a client at their word when they say, these guys need sales training, because very often that's not what the issue is.
Yeah. So. And I love that. And that Jocko Willink, says something very similar in his book, Extreme Ownership. And I think that we can't say this enough, because we do have a tendency to look at things in fragmented pieces rather than holistically. And this is an applicable principle across the board. And the other thing I love that you said in this chapter is you talked about the second and third order effects. And most people don't think beyond the first order effects of things. And that is hugely impactful to everything we do in life.
Yeah, well, the metaphor I use in the book is like it feels great to have a few cocktails on Sunday afternoon and then have a few more and a few more. That's your first order effect. It feels great. Your second order effect is when you wake up Monday morning and you've got to go to work, and your head hurts and you're tired and you're not on your game. Your third order effect is when you do that one time too many and they show you the exit because you're not productive. So it is important. In consulting, it's technology is a great example, because we're going to buy this new system and it's going to solve our ills. But that's the first order effect. You might get some automation out of it, for example, or you might get better reports out of it, for example. But what about the people who have to learn a new way to do things? They tend to resist. Someone has been doing something the same way for 20 years. You're going to tell them to do it differently? They have to completely reorder their lives, their work lives. That's your second order effect. And the third order effect is morale slumps and you get high turnover.
Right.
So you absolutely need to think in that dimension as well when you're imparting your wisdom to clients.
And I like that you included that in holistically, because, at the beginning when we were talking about holistically, we were thinking about thinking through all the elements that are involved. But in this, you're also saying, but think just beyond that, think into the ramifications of the decisions that you're making. And very often, even as an employee, we're often guilty of just doing what's in front of us and not thinking, but what are the long-term ramifications of this? I think we all, at least I made this mistake in my younger days, would send an email without thinking about the long-term ramifications of, well, when this email gets in the wrong hands, what are the consequences of that?
Exactly.
So I think I loved that you included that, because, Ray Dalio talks a lot about that in his book, Principles. And it is absolutely quintessential to thinking holistically about something.
Absolutely. And that's where that really reinforced it for me. Dalio's book is another gem that everybody should pick up and read.
Yeah, I agree. I think we nerded out over that in one of our conversations once.
Yeah, we did.
Well, yeah. Well, one of the things that I truly loved about your book is chapter 9, which is the 7th key, make it your own. And this is where the concept of courage really comes in, the courage to be uniquely yourself. And I loved these questions that you pose to your readers. On page 153, you say, consider for a moment why the world is a better place with you in it. How many people have ever even considered that? I think even in spite of all my reading, I had never actually considered this question. You say, what talents have you brought to bear? What are you great at doing? What do your clients truly appreciate about your work? And I think, another way we could say that is, what does your spouse truly appreciate about you? What does your employer truly appreciate about you? I think if we all took 10 minutes to answer these questions, consider for a moment why the world is a better place with you in it. What talents have you brought to bear? What are you great at doing? And what do your clients / spouse / friends / colleagues, right, truly appreciate about your work?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's and I get deeper into that at the last chapter of the book. It was Steve Jobs said, "We're here to make a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why else even be here?"
Right.
Like, what are you bringing to the table? Like a very, very important consideration, but more importantly, we can go to Harvard and Stanford and we can get MBAs and we can learn the mechanics of the work that we do. We can become brilliant with a spreadsheet and in finance and what have you. But what is it that makes it uniquely yours? Anybody can get an education these days. Anybody can learn anything for next to nothing these days. It's all out there. How do you make yourself different? How do you make yourself uniquely valuable to your clients? That's what that's about. Make it your own. What you learn, if you're just taking like Rob's 7 keys, well, then you're just mini Rob, and that there's no good in that. You've got to make your own 7 keys or 5 or 75. It doesn't matter, but make it your own.
Well, and I love that. And what you do a great job of in the book is laying out a roadmap to how to figure out how to make it your own. What are the do's and don'ts? And you give them in such a great way that it gives the reader, just like those broad questions I just asked, it gives the reader the ability to kind of sit back and go, what does my own look like? And I know that, even you challenged me as a coachee. Yeah, you were the coachor. As a coachee, you challenged me to in many ways, how is it your own, Tiana? How is it your own? And you would constantly challenge me on that. And you got me into the habit of doing that without realizing it by just asking. But I love that now, after reading your book, it's not going to be Rob's head in the back of my voice saying, but what makes it uniquely yours? It's going to be more of a conscious forethought of, I need to make this uniquely mine. And I love that, seeing both being a beneficiary of this concept in my, my day-to-day work, but now reading it in your book it was really exciting to kind of watch that come full circle. And I think that's really kind of the heart of your book, is the courageous consultant has the courage to make it their own. Absolutely.
Get in there and duke it out and stick your neck out. Yeah. That's what life is all about, sticking your neck out. If you're not doing that, you're with those timid souls right? Who dare nothing,
Right.
who are just like everybody else.
Right. We're all going to have regrets at the end of the day, right? I would rather my regrets be from stuff I tried than stuff I didn't try.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things that you said in here, going further down, talking about working with clients, and I think that this is an applicable principle across the board. You said, when the rent is due, it takes courage to walk away from any payday. But when we're true to ourselves and allow our values to guide our decisions, we exemplify the authenticity that is a non-negotiable standard embraced by exceptional advisors. What you're talking about here is there have been times when you have had an opportunity to work with a client, but you just realized that there was not an alignment there. And you give great examples, absolutely phenomenal examples of when there may not be alignment. And your courage here is talking about acknowledging and recognizing that not everything that comes across your path is right for you, and having the courage to acknowledge that, walk away, especially when the rent comes due. And I loved those stories and the examples you gave.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I can share many situations where it's just not a good fit. If you're coming off, well, there's a couple of things here. I mean, if you're coming off as taking anything that comes your way, you're never going to get great at anything. You're just going to be a dilettante. You're going to be somebody's taskmaster, or somebody's going to be a taskmaster, and you're going to be doing the tasks. That's not consulting. When you are sure about who you are, and you bring to bear those sensibilities that are uniquely your own, it's very clear who you don't want to work with. Yeah. And it's, to my mind, really, really important, if at all possible, to say no, thank you. Mm-hmm. I mean, the stories I have about that go back years. They're in the book. I won't bore you, but there come times when you're just sitting there and just realizing this is not going to work out, like a bad first date. Like, this is not going to work out.
And, and I would say to the listeners, those job interviews that you have where you're sitting there and something inside you is going, listen to that instinct. If not every situation, not every job, not every potential business partner, not every dating partner, as you mentioned, is right for you. And it's okay. And it takes courage to acknowledge those and say, I'm out.
Absolutely.
The other story that you put in, and we're getting close to our time, so I'm not going to rush this though, because we got some good stuff left to talk about. You talk about an incredible experience you had with a surgeon, and you tell the story of your wife. And you talk about all of the ways that he gained credibility with you and how he helped truly solve a deep need of hers. And it's a great story, but I love how you summarize it. On page 199, you said, he remained curious, always digging deeper for answers. He treated the person holistically, not the problem in isolation. He used his own innovative techniques. And so you keep going down. You say he never jumped to conclusions, letting evidence gathered from a variety of perspectives support his findings and recommendations. He was thorough in his assessment. And you say, to borrow from Einstein, with an hour to save the world, he spent 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute on the solution. And so I love that summary, which does a great job summarizing so many of the principles in your book.
Yeah. I mean, that was a guy named Thomas Bird in Nashville, a brilliant surgeon. And what was most stunning about our initial meeting with him was it was almost like the last thing I want to do is operate on you. I don't want, he said it, as a surgeon who makes his money doing surgery, said the last thing I want to do, and it wasn't just my wife, it was anybody. The last thing I want to do is perform surgery. He's an osteopathic surgeon, and again, a brilliant guy. And that just took me like, wow, what if consultants said, you don't want my intervention. My intervention is going to be radical, or it could be, it's going to be, we're going to rip and replace a $50 million collection of technology, we're going to try to rework your organizational culture. These are going to be difficult things. Are you willing to work with me? There's no magic wand here. And I thought that was a perfect role model for a good or an exceptional advisor.
Yeah.
I like to lead with, how do you think I can help you? And that's exactly what he did. I probably got that from him. Like, how do you think I can help you? And then after the protocols, months, by the way, after the protocols had been gone through, the research had been done, he said, I think I can help you. And there was so much power in that. He didn't walk into, our office and sit down and say, oh, I think I can help you. He did a whole lot of homework and had a whole lot of interactions and a whole lot of diagnostics before he came to the conclusion that, yep, I think this is what we're dealing with. And lo and behold, that's exactly what it was. So it was a couple of days in Nashville. I got to eat some really good fried chicken while my wife recuperated. And it was a great learning for me. So.
Well, and a couple things. I love the things that you learned that you outlined, but I love that you go into a doctor appointment and you walk out with a whole list of lessons learned. And wouldn't the world be a greater place if we took every opportunity like you lay out in this book as a learning opportunity, and we sit back and we analyze it and we say, what did I learn from this experience? So I love that learner in you. I know that's one of your, it's obvious based on this book, that love of learning is one of your.
Absolutely. The top. Yeah. In the top 3 for sure.
Yeah. So. Yeah, absolutely. Well, to wrap up, we're not even halfway through the things I wanted to talk about, which maybe means in the future we have to have a episode 2. But I love how in the last chapter, The Courageous Consultant, you just kind of go through a quick list. So I want to run through this list and then close by telling the listeners where they can get your book, where they can find you, because I know you have a website for your coaching, for your consulting. But I wanted to wrap up with this. You talk about these different hallmarks, is what you call them, hallmarks of an exceptional advisor. And so I just wanted to read through this list because I thought it was amazing. The courage to be open-minded, the courage not to know, the courage to compromise, the courage to slow down. That one hit home for me. The courage to innovate, the courage to step back, the courage to put skin in the game, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to shut up. That one's also probably a good one for me. And the courage to be ourselves. So we still had a lot of material that we could go through, but I just wanted to end on that because I thought those were fantastic, Rob. And thank you for sharing those. Those are all things that we should have the courage to do.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. This was a pleasure. Real pleasure having a conversation with you. And I'm glad you enjoyed the book. And I hope others enjoy it too. It is available on Amazon, but I will tell you, if you hit me up on LinkedIn, which is probably the best thing to do, Rob Berg. I'm at Per and Night, PERRNKNIGHT. You communicate with me through that. I can get you an autographed copy, and I'll discount it actually from the Amazon price as well. So, or you can email me directly at rberg, RBERG, at pernight.com, PERRKNIGHT.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I will put all those links and Rob's information in the show notes. So for those of you driving, don't try to write anything down. It'll be in the show notes. You can access all of this information. But Rob, I'm, again, having been not even a passenger, bystander in the journey of watching you write this book, bring this together. I can't thank you enough for the time that you put into this, because truly this is going to be a go-to book for me for all the aforementioned reasons. I mean, we talked about everything from psychological needs to virtues, being courageous. These are all such great and important principles, and just making it every rotation around the sun that we make it on this planet, right? Great.
Like I said, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me today. And, thank you.
Yeah. Well, Rob, thank you for being on today's episode. And so again, thank you guys for tuning in. It's such a pleasure to have you on this podcast. Please be sure to leave a review, like, and share this episode if you found this useful. And I know you did. So please share this with your friends and family. Let them know about the Courageous Consultants. Until next time, this has been Tiana Showy, Ain't Quite Right. Thank you for tuning in. New episodes are released on the second and fourth Monday of every month. If you like this content, please subscribe, leave a review, and tell anyone else you think that will enjoy joining us on this journey to tune in. Until next time.